May the fourth be with you.
All right, hello and welcome to the Merle and Locke podcast. I'm Merle.
And I'm Locke.
And today we have ourselves a special guest. Welcome, Jane Doe.
Woo.
In celebration of May the 4th, everybody usually takes this time to revisit Star Wars and everything that Star Wars has to offer, the universe. All the movies, the TV shows, the video games. There's just so much to it. The books, the stories, everything. And we here on the Merle and Locke podcast absolutely adore our Star Wars. Of course, we are nerds. So today we were gonna just go through some theories or some questions we might have for one another about Star Wars lore or things we love about Star Wars, things that we don't so much love, I suppose. And just discuss our findings and what we think. So to start us off, we're going to try and get some bullet points here, and then we'll expand on each. So Jane Doe, I know you've written down some questions to get some conversation going. Why don't you hit us with one of them questions?
Well, why don't we start off with just some of our favorite characters? Something easy, kind of set the tone for where we all are with our like or love of the Star Wars.
All right. Who wants to start? I want to hear this.
I'll start. I posed the question.
Okay.
I can be the first to answer.
Okay. All right. Let's hear.
Well, I'm most familiar with the original trilogy, so episodes 4, 5, and 6. So my favorite character is probably Leia. Second favorite's R2-D2. Chewbacca's third.
Oh, Chewbacca. I didn't even consider Chewbacca.
He's a choice. He's a choice.
He is a choice. He's a great character.
My fourth is Padme.
Okay, Padme's awesome.
And then my fifth is Vader, specifically.
Oh, okay. So not even Anakin, just Vader.
Just Vader.
Love it.
Solid villain.
All right, how about I go next? I had a lot of trouble with this one because you posed the question before we even started this, so we can take some time to consider our favorites. And I had the most trouble deciding on characters. So I'd say my top two favorite. I really love both Qui-Gon and Dooku.
Okay.
Dooku before, Darth Tyrannus and all of that. I liked him, like where he came from. Like I like the character he was before.
You're talking about him as a Jedi?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so those are my top two. I really love Plo Koon. He's a great character. He doesn't get a lot of time on the screen, but from like what I've seen and what I've read, I really love his character.
Well, let's give some other people background as to who Plo Koon is in case they don't know.
Okay, he's the orange dude on the Jedi Council. Yeah, which like in the movies he doesn't get a lot.
No, he doesn't have a whole lot of talk time.
No, so in the episodes 1 through 3, you'll see him sitting on the council, and then I think like when Order 66 goes through, you see him getting obliterated in a starship. So I think that's the only screen time he really gets. But I mean, he gets a lot more expanded upon on his character, like in the Clone Wars TV show. And I remember earliest from when the episodes 1 through 3 first came out. They made a video game for PlayStation, I think it was, and he was my favorite character to use in that video game because you get to choose from Plo Koon, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, can't recall who else. But yeah, he was one of my favorites. So that's 3. Okay, 4th, I would have to go with I really like Darth Bane. He's a great character. Obviously, he's not in any of the movies. He's in the literature and legends from the Old Republic.
Extended universe stuff, yeah.
Yeah. He's a great character, and I love his character arc. And fifth, oh gosh, I couldn't decide between. I had the most trouble deciding between Obi-Wan and Anakin. I think I might lean more towards Obi-Wan, just because like he is like this constant, like throughout almost all of Star Wars, and he's just an amazing. Well, like I wouldn't say he has like, it seems like he has a lot of depth to his character, but I love his personality. That's what really like attracted me to his character. I love how sassy a character, deceptive a character he is. He's pretty great. All right, so Locke, give us your top 5.
I hope you're ready.
Oh boy.
So number 1, and I feel like this may not come as a surprise, is Anakin.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Not a surprise.
And I really want to preface this with the fact of, yes, I know that people don't like Anakin, especially in the second and third movie. A lot of people seeing, especially Christian Haydenson, they were like, I think he's just a crybaby. If you watch just those movies, you almost just want to think that he's a crybaby. Right,
which we can
Yeah,
discuss
we
him
can get into
a lot
this.
more later on,
Right.
Because I have a lot of things to say about him too.
That's like one of the whole questions.
I know. You watch him in the Clone Wars, and you really start to see some character development as him as like a commander and pilot. Even see him as a master figure, and he does pretty well, and you can almost see why things kind of deteriorated in the third film as to where he just finally snapped. So, I mean, I really do love the overall character arc for Anakin. I think it was well done. Dave Filoni, I mean, even George Lucas, his original intentions were pretty well.
Yeah,
well
Dave
thought out.
Filoni is definitely like a godsend to the Star Wars universe. That man is an angel.
Right.
We have 4 more on this list.
I know.
Oh yeah, sorry.
So another one that I'll bring up, my second one, I'll say is Qui-Gon. He's a nice, I'd see him almost as a gray Jedi. Almost. He goes more off of the will of the Force than anything else.
He doesn't buy into the code that the Jedi have laid out before themselves.
Right. I mean, the Jedi have kind of fallen from their natural ways, but that's besides the point. We'll talk about that, I'm sure.
We'll talk about that later.
On the list.
Right. It's on the list. Third character, as a strong female character, I will add Padme Amidala to the list. Fourth character, I will add Darth Revan as another good one. Yes, now he's considered legends now.
Sure. Yeah.
But he is another really good character to get behind and understanding the sides of the Force and how he contributed to both sides.
I guess it would be fair to state that we are extended universe apologists here.
Absolutely. What's considered the EU now?
Well, it's always been the EU. It's Legends
Right.
now because
Yeah, right.
it doesn't fit. We can talk about it later, but it doesn't fit the full narrative that's been created at this point. But huge fans over here.
Yep.
Absolutely.
This one I didn't quite think for. My fifth character. Yeah, I'll put Obi-Wan on there. He's seen some character development all throughout the franchise.
Have you finished Kenobi yet?
I have not finished Kenobi
Okay.
yet. I'm sorry. I'm so behind.
No, I'm just that's more for like a frame of reference for what we're talking about, right? Because like I haven't watched Clone Wars yet. I haven't finished Mandalorian. I have not even started Kenobi. I'm been in such a dry spell of content consumption lately.
Yeah, yeah.
So just, as a frame of reference for what we're talking about, some of those things obviously aren't included because we
Right.
haven't finished them at this
Right.
point.
Now, a question I have real quick before we get into the heavy stuff. I know, Jane Doe, you already answered this one, but I wanted to see what everybody's favorite droid was, like throughout all the movies and TV shows and everything. Like your top droid that you love or you adore the most. I know Locke hasn't seen it yet. I don't know about you, Jane Doe. But in the Andor TV show, I have a new favorite droid after watching that TV show. And it's B2. And he is the most adorable little droid I have ever seen. Like, he's not like tiny or anything. I'm just saying, like, his personality absolutely kills me.
When I tried to look up just B2 in Google, it just gives me a bomber plane.
Oh yeah, the B2 bombers. Yeah, you might want to try a B2 Star Wars or something, like some qualifiers there.
It's B2 Emo. So B2 EMO.
Cute little guy. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is your guys, or well, Jane Doe, I'm gonna assume it's R2, yeah?
It is R2. It's how integral he is to the story overall. And he's the first one we see that has his own little like sassy personality. Well, C3PO has a personality. He's just dry.
But the combination, their relationship with each other definitely adds for a nice.
Well, it's that traditional thing of like the funny man and the straight man, right? Like the
Straight shooter, yeah.
yeah. Like all your old comics used to have straight men because it made them seem funnier, and it's that kind of setup,
Yeah.
which works.
Absolutely.
But R2's the one with the superior personality, probably on purpose.
And all he does is beep boop.
And all he does is beep
I
boop.
love it.
He beep boops around. He beep boops around. C3PO tells him to do something, and next thing you see, he is headed the opposite direction.
Yeah.
with like a little fart sound to boot, because he'll just
Yeah.
go.
Oddly enough, one of the reasons he's my favorite, this is a bit of a tangent story, but when I was a kid and we would go on vacations with some family friends, their one daughter would play Lego Star Wars, and she would kill R2-D2 over and over. And
What a monster.
and all you would hear is the scream.
Wow!
So
I love that.
there's like that random bit of nostalgia attached to him too, which has
Golly.
nothing to do with Star Wars, but it is a reason that I like R2-D2.
All right, Locke, what's your favorite droid?
I'll put as my top R2. He's the very first one that I really took a liking to.
You copycat.
Man.
Hold on.
Have an original
Oh.
thought.
Jeez, yeah. Anyway, good lord, bud.
Listen here. There were some other really good droids that I'd have to add onto the list of just super fun, like they're characters of their own, like they have their own super rare personality for droids nonetheless. Is Chopper from the Rebels series.
Oh, I never saw the Rebel series.
Oh, dude.
I haven't seen
I
that one.
I know that I was super hesitant on watching the Rebels series because when I was younger and Rebels came out, I thought Rebels was just kind of like a childish show. I watched it now, like fairly recently. I was like, you know what? It wasn't half bad.
Oh, okay.
But
All right.
Chopper kind of has like R2-D2 vibes. And then you eventually meet this protocol droid, an Imperial protocol droid, or he's an inventory droid. He was protocol turned inventory. And he's got like this Squidward vibe. Where
Okay.
he hates everything.
I love that.
And the combination of the two together, then, it's great. It's to make up for the lack of R2 and C3PO.
Okay, well, I think we've covered enough on droids. Do we have any big questions that we want to get out there, Jane Doe?
Oh, we have so many big questions.
Okay, let's hear the first one.
I mean, one of the benefits of Star Wars, right, is that it's relatively philosophical, whether or not you like it.
Sure.
Like
yeah.
you have to ask somewhat deep questions to kind of form an opinion about things. Otherwise, you're just kind of like, okay, they're dooting along. Well, we already kind of touched on the Jedi, so let's go there, right? What is the proper role of the Jedi? And as a kind of a fine tuner, did the Jedi Council fulfill that role at the time of the prequels?
All right. Well, the Jedi are, of course, peacekeepers. They keep the peace, and I think there was no peace in the galaxy.
I would also kind of argue / add that they had that monk mentality, right? Like they weren't just out to keep the peace, they were out to help people, at least initially, and provide for needs.
Yeah. Well, I did have an opinion on the Jedi when it came to Dooku, right?
Right.
Because Dooku was a Jedi Master, and when he was like, if you watch, I think it's called Tales of the Jedi. It was a little short series. You could see like Dooku like before he became Darth Tyrannus, and everything, and how he approached things and his thoughts on certain missions that he was put on. And it was always this feeling of, yes, the Jedi were peacekeepers, but there was this inequality in the galaxy between, I guess, like the rulers of certain planetary systems and what have you, and between them and their people, there was often this huge gap of equality, and these people that wanted to achieve equality in their planetary system, they would have to cause like some kind of, they would have to have like some kind of uprising, right? Saying like, we're not going to stand for this anymore. It isn't fair. Our people are starving, this, that, and the other. And by doing that, causing that duress within their system, it would cause the Jedi to have to move in and, instill that peace again in that system. And so equality was never met, because they would always be shut down during their uprisings, yeah?
Right.
And so it seemed like, rather than looking into it further, which I mean, sometimes, yes, they did, but oftentimes it was, people were shut down, and the rulers within the system would continue, like crapping on their people, right? And just supporting themselves and getting all fat and happy in their high towers and what have you, and the people would suffer. And that was something that Dooku saw oftentimes, and by extension Qui-Gon. And it would also lead to this discontent in Dooku's heart, where he wouldn't want to help these people in their high towers, and he wouldn't have the patience to support them, and oftentimes, like, through his, the hate he would feel, he would often be talked down by Qui-Gon. Like, Qui-Gon he obviously Qui-Gon exuded this sense of patience where Dooku couldn't find that patience in himself, and that actually led to like a really interesting story arc, how Dooku eventually turned to the dark side. So Jedi, I see them as simply peacekeepers, but it was flawed in a sense.
So just a separate unrelated question, right? Because now you have me a little curious. Where do you think you would fall between light and dark?
God, no, that was one I thought about too. I was like, I don't know. Personally, I'm not one to. I look deep into things.
I want to be totally clear. I absolutely would fall 100% on the dark side, solely because I'm an emotional person. Like, I can be logical and I can look at things analytically, but I value emotion above like everything else.
well, that's the thing. So in the beginning with the I think I'm pronouncing it. Can I pronounce it right? The Jedi instead of simply Jedi, it was Jedi because there wasn't any separation between Jedi and Sith, right?
Right.
So the Jedi believed that you needed to find like a sense of balance between the light and the dark. Yeah.
Right.
It wasn't one extreme to the other. Now, I think later on, when there was that separation between the two, the Jedi basically cuffed themselves. You know, like they didn't trust themselves to be able to be balanced, so they lived by this code so that they wouldn't be tempted to move to the dark side.
Which is where the kind of like monastic nature of them comes into play, like that detachment that's very like,
right.
You know, monk-like of them.
Yeah, they couldn't trust themselves.
Because they have no self-control, yeah.
Exactly. And that's why I really enjoyed Qui-Gon specifically, is because he was able to find that sense of balance where he was a dedicated Jedi, but, you know, I don't know if it was through his training with Dooku and how seeing how his master reacted to things, if it somehow molded him into someone who saw these, you know, this inequalities and being able to grasp onto these passions and finding that sense of balance, because he had like this innate sense of patience, and so that's why I really enjoyed his character, because I feel like Qui-Gon was like the closest thing to the original Jedi, at least from what I've seen thus far,
right.
You know, in the movies and what have you.
And
right.
Isn't it interesting that at the time he was not able to join the Jedi Council, whether that was on their part or on his part, and I think there's a little room for debate there, not a lot, because he would have had to stop doing some of the things that he was doing because it didn't fall in line with what they wanted.
Well, Yoda didn't want Qui-Gon on the council. There was other members of the council that wanted him to join because they appreciated his unique views, right? But Yoda didn't think it was appropriate for the Jedi Council. That's why when Mace Windu became a member of the council, they had passed over Dooku in favor of Mace Windu, because Mace Windu showed those, Dooku showed those, you know, those emotional qualities where
right.
Mace Windu did not necessarily. I mean, he did have some little tendencies here and there, but it wasn't as much as Dooku had. So that's why they passed over Dooku, took in Mace Windu as a new member. And I don't know who died. I don't remember who died on the council to get Mace Windu in. We'll have to leave that up to the commenters, I suppose. I don't recall.
It's fair enough to say that at that point, more than ever, the Jedi and the Jedi Council were a political pawn or political panel more than anything. They weren't really making their own moves at that point without someone directing them where to go and what to do. And kind of the irony in how angry they were getting at Anakin for his closeness to Palpatine when they wouldn't do anything without consulting with politicians first.
Yeah. I thought it was more politicians came to the Jedi to get their opinion on matters, but they couldn't get permission unless the government gave them the go-ahead.
Right, they couldn't like interfere with things. So as far as the Jedi going out and keeping peace, they were enforcers at that point.
Now that we're talking about, I don't remember what the original question was.
The role of the Jedi, the proper
Yeah.
role of the Jedi.
Oh, okay. So, look, I'd like to hear your opinion too. What do you think about the Jedi?
So, not the Jedi. Jedi are different. And not the...
Right.
So, yeah, the Jedi had fallen from their way as far as what their original system was. It's a lot like you said. Now, the Jedi and the Sith, as you see it now, used to all share a planet together. So that planet was Tython, and they all worked together to kind of study in the Force. Now, as we understand, the dark side is if you are too weak to hold back on what the dark side tries to pull you in. Like the dark side feeds on the emotion and you just kind of get sucked into it. It's a lot like if you just let into anger, like if you're mad about something and you hold on to it, you just kind of get sucked into this.
Yeah, what do you think is like, because whenever I saw someone become a Sith, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, like if it was someone studying the Force and they became a Sith, I understand that earlier on sometimes like children would be recruited and so they knew nothing but the dark side, yeah? But when it came to people that were originally, a Jedi or a Padawan or whatever, and they turned to the dark side, in a lot of cases, I felt like it was always like a breaking point that brought them to it, right? Where they'd give into these like emotional, or they give into their passions, yeah.
Right.
And there was always, what was that? There was a quote that the Sith had, especially in the times of the I think it was called the Dark Brotherhood or whatever, where peace is a lie, there's only passion or whatever.
Through passion. Oh my god, I knew it. We were even playing the Old Republic and the Sith code came up. Peace is a lie, there is only passion. Through passion I gain strength. Through strength I gain power. Through power I gain victory. Through victory my chains are broken. The Force shall set me free.
Yeah. So it was always like, I felt like people that were susceptible to the dark side were people that were, they felt like basically imprisoned, their whole lives, right? And moving to the dark side, they felt this freedom. Yeah.
Right.
Well, let me ask you a follow-up though, right? Because I always saw it as more of a conscious decision. And one of the biggest arguments I had for that was, at what point did Anakin become a Sith?
Ah, jeez. Yeah. Now,
because he went on that whole revenge streak for his mom, but they were still trying to put him on the Jedi Council.
Well, nobody was putting him on the council.
The only person who wanted him on the council was the Chancellor, which they all did not like the idea because it was another ear Chancellor. They knew that he would end up getting every bit of information because Anakin was just too close with him.
Yeah, so I was going to say, like, when it came to someone turning to the dark side, or a Jedi turning to the dark side, it was usually some kind of breaking point, yeah? So with Dooku, his like the death of Qui-Gon definitely had something to do with turning him. But well, I mean, like he was basically a pawn to Sidious for a while because he was trying to achieve these things to create these equalities I was talking about earlier, and he was making moves to achieve that. And then it wasn't until he offed Yaddle, or whatever her name was. The lady Yoda, or whatever.
Yaddle.
Yeah, that was. I feel like. Well, that was the point where he was just like, "Well, I got too far. Better just embrace it now. There's no going back from this one." Now, when it came to Anakin, he had these passions, right? He couldn't avoid it, right? I felt like he could have been a completely balanced Jedi, yeah, but every time he acted with emotion or passion, he was always like belittled, or patronized or something by the other Jedi, where they're telling him like, no, you're wrong, you shouldn't do that, instead of like embracing it and finding a balance where I feel like he would have achieved had Qui-Gon been his master. He was stuck with Obi-Wan, where Obi-Wan was like straight and narrow, and every time Anakin would make one of these decisions, which weren't necessarily bad, nothing inherently evil. It was just something he felt he needed to do because it felt right, but it was acting on his passions, and Obi-Wan was always like, "What's wrong with you? Like, I can't believe you did that, and blasey. You need to detach yourself, and la la la." And it always like created this sense of discomfort I felt in Anakin, and like he had so much potential, but like at every turn he was just completely crapped on by the other Jedi. Like even with everything that he achieved, right? Like he achieved so much, especially compared to those that were on the council already. Like he achieved so many things, but he was still belittled because of his tendency to act on his passions, or by acting through emotion.
He was absolutely suppressed by the Jedi.
But that doesn't answer the question as to when he became a Sith, because Obi-Wan was still trying to bring him back into the Jedi fold at their last battle.
So you're asking like what his final breaking point was?
You say it was a breaking point, and arguably the first breaking point we see with Anakin is when his mother dies. Arguably. Like
okay,
the first real breaking point we see with Anakin. But he doesn't do that and then immediately become a Sith, which implies that he had to choose, because he also does not immediately become a Sith after Order 66 with what he does there, because Obi-Wan still comes to try to bring him back into the fold. If he was already Sith at that point, he would kind of be a lost cause. Why wouldn't Obi-Wan just show up with the full intent to take him down?
Because I feel like, just my opinion is like, when it comes to becoming a Sith in general, I feel like there's always this solid turning point where there's no going back. And I felt like his no going back moment, I felt like it was when he turned on Windu. That's what I feel like. He was finally like, that's it, I've gone too far, gotta think, I'm a Sith now.
I mean, he never, as far as we know, and I mean, I haven't watched anything else to lead up to this point, but I can say, like, did he actually kill Mace Windu?
Oh, jeez.
Mace Windu was only
I don't know.
Mace Windu was only pushed out of a window. He had his arm chopped off and he was pushed out of a window. Does that mean, now we know from Anakin, he had his arm lopped off. Did he die from it? No. And I mean, it's not like Mace Windu was just some rookie.
But I mean, as far as my thought goes, it was the fact that perhaps he thought he killed Windu. Yeah. I'm not saying that Windu is actually dead, because, I don't know. But I'm saying, like, I'm pretty sure, I may be being presumptuous, but I'm pretty sure Anakin thought he killed Windu.
I'm going to say something pretty controversial. Are you ready for it? That moment when he put his knees down and he said, "Yes, Master," to Palpatine, that was all his plan to eventually turn on Palpatine. Like, he was going to do whatever it took to make Palpatine seem like he was on his side. So he tried on Mustafar to say to Padme, "It's okay, like, things will be alright. I got this covered, like, we can take things over." You know, there may have been a few other things that were blinding him in other ways, because after all, he thought Obi-Wan was turning on him, which, I mean, Obi-Wan was there to stop him, so you were like, it's not like they really filled each other in. You know, they went on missions and never really filled each other in on what they were doing. It's the way they've always been, especially all throughout Clone Wars. Obi-Wan would go off to the planet of Mandalore to save the woman who he once loved, and he didn't tell anybody. I mean, he tried to tell the Jedi Council, and the Jedi Council are like, "We shouldn't interfere with that." But Anakin didn't know about it, and eventually he went to go save it, Obi-Wan. So my point is, they don't really tell each other what their plans are. They just do what they feel needs to be done. So Anakin has this whole plan that he's going to eventually kill Palpatine and take it over. But the turning point is when Kenobi does the unforgivable move of chopping off 3 limbs, which is not a Jedi thing to do. He chops off 3 of his limbs and leaves them there to die. So that's the point at which Anakin turns, but I don't want to say that he really turns full Sith, because I want to say if you turn Sith is when you start believing in the mantra. And I don't think he ever truly followed the mantra.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. Not really.
I think with something like that, perception is key.
Yeah, I mean, that's rough. Because, like, obviously we know he did become Sith. Because, I mean, as Vader, I mean, all the atrocities that he committed, like, we know he was Sith. He had that eye for power, right?
I mean, you start looking over the comics then, and I mean, I don't know exactly what it was, why he was always on this hunt to look for Jedi, and I think it was mainly because he was just looking for Obi-Wan the whole entire time, which you see in Kenobi. He wants to find Kenobi. He's on the hunt, much like Darth Maul is all throughout Clone Wars. He's like, "I swear to God, I'm gonna get you for this."
So the question, once again, I forgot what the question was, because we started going off on rants. What was the question? Was there even a question?
The most recent one was at what point someone becomes Sith, specifically Anakin, for the sake of, you know, probably one of the best documented full turns that we've seen.
Yeah, because so Jane Doe, so you're suggesting that becoming a Sith is just like a build-up of circumstance until
they make that decision for themselves. Because at the very least, Obi-Wan was willing to try to bring Anakin back in until Mustafar. And if Anakin had just fully gone beyond the point of no return with any of those things that he did, which there's a bigger question there about, like, good guys and bad guys, when the good guys are willing to take back a guy that killed a crap ton of children for no reason.
Oh yeah, that was pretty bad, wasn't it?
But at the point that there is still, like, a Jedi representative who thinks maybe there's a chance to save him, because Obi-Wan didn't go into that fight with the intent of, I have to destroy Anakin to stop this. He went in with the intent of, maybe I can talk him out of it, but I have to be prepared for the worst.
I don't know. I felt like that was just because of his connection to Anakin.
They didn't have a great connection.
But he was like his brother. You were my brother, Anakin.
Well, they're not good brothers to each other then.
I loved you.
They treated each other like crap most of the time.
Well, I'm the same way with my brother.
But I mean, they were still there for each other when they knew that they needed it. They were still there. Anakin was there numerous times to save Obi-Wan's hide, and then Obi-Wan would gloat when he finally had the chance to save save Anakin's hide.
I'm not saying post that point he would have been able to anything, honestly, sit on the council, become a master. Like, we're not talking that at that point. But do you really think that if Obi-Wan could have talked him out of it, the other Jedi would have just looked at him and gone, no? Because I don't. I think they would have said, well, as long as he's going to walk the straight and narrow from here on, it's better to have him on our side than on their side.
I feel like, knowing the Jedi and the choices that they've made, I feel like they would have offed him because he was too much of a liability. I don't think they would have forgiven him.
Really?
You know?
As the chosen one, you don't think they would have tried to just rein him back in again?
Absolutely not. I don't
There
think
is one
so.
Jedi in particular that I feel would absolutely want to kill him on the spot. And I'm trying to remember his name for the life of me. He was the dude with the big forehead. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, Mundy.
Yes,
Mundy?
yes. It was
Mundy?
Mundy. Yeah. He was already afraid when Yoda started saying that he was hearing voices in regards to Qui-Gon talking to him. Mundy thought that he was going crazy and that the Sith, in particular, that Yoda was going to turn to the dark side because he was hearing voices. He's like, that's not a Jedi thing.
Well, then I guess that would bring my opinion back around to the Jedi having lost their way from their original purpose. Because they were willing to let people get away with some egregious things in the name of the Jedi. That would have made them pretty hypocritical for not holding those people accountable, but trying to hold Anakin accountable for the things that he did just because it wasn't in the name of the Jedi. Like, that's pretty tyrannical. And I'm not saying you guys are obviously wrong in the assumption that they would just off Anakin, but then they're pretty crappy good guys, I guess is what I'm saying. Because, like, people representing their organization would quell rebellions, like you were saying, and that's essentially the same concept.
The other thing I want to say is how some of the Jedis, even the Jedi Masters, viewed the clones. So if they wanted to see themselves as peacekeepers and protect all of humanity, protect the people, why did some of them look at clones and go, I don't care if they live or die?
Yeah, honestly, was Order 66 so much of a stretch with the way they were treating them?
Well, I thought the canon was that they were chipped. Like, the clones had some kind of...
That is the canon, but I'm saying, like, from the perspective that these are cloned from a living being with a consciousness, and therefore, to some extent, probably have their own consciousness. And now the Jedi are treating them terribly, like pawns, like fodder.
Yeah, well, there had been clones in the past who have turned, because of that very reason, like how they were being treated.
Right.
So then they also want to blame Palpatine and Anakin for that, and it was like, maybe that was just a matter of time. Because you, as the good guys, were treating these people who were essentially people so horribly.
Mm-hmm.
I am not pro Order 66.
Man, I feel like Anakin could very well have brought balance to the Force. Not like the Force as a whole, but show them like that there is a more achievable, balanced nature to Jedi.
Well, that rolls right into another question.
Right.
What would that look like?
What does it mean to bring balance to the Force?
Well, I think, like I was saying earlier with the Jedi, where they had found that sense of balance before, the turning of, I don't remember what the breaking point was. So you're asking, like, if if Anakin were able to inspire the other Jedi to find this sense of balance in the Force, right? Is that
Or if he did. So my argument, just as an example, which I know I've talked to Locke about before, is that Anakin absolutely brought balance to the Force as the Force existed during that time. Because we had the rule of two in place. And then how many Jedi did he leave the world with? Like Jedi that were part of the Jedi Order.
That's true. I was thinking more he brought balance once he, offed Palpatine.
That's another completely valid argument that I've, seen other places. But I'm saying like my personal perspective is just that like we ended up with two Jedi, like from the Jedi Order and two Sith, and that's about as balanced as you get.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
Here's the moment that I would say like that balance was brought back. Yeah, after he killed Palpatine, because Luke went on to form his own order, and Luke wasn't quite a full-on light side user, like not extremist light like a lot of the original Jedi ideologies were, which was the point of like you said, the Force Wars from the original Jedi was because you had two extremists. You had the ones that believed that only the light side was the stronger power, and the other people who believed the other side was stronger. So that's kind of where we got the Jedi and Sith. You had your two extremes, and you needed that balance where people could believe that there was good in both the light and dark side of the Force. You just needed to know how to use it.
Does that mean that we collectively, the three of us, think that Obi-Wan and Yoda became more balanced between the time that Luke would have been born, that day on Mustafar, and the time that he sought out Ben Kenobi?
Yeah, I feel like without that structure that they had in place prior, I feel like without that, they actually, started to see things, with like as a clearer picture, right? Instead of being all formal and everything and having to abide by this particular code. Yeah, I definitely feel like they eventually, saw things with a lot more clarity.
Right.
There was probably the aspect of acting for each other that comes out of it too then, where you're in a group of Jedi who are expecting you to act a certain way, so any issues you're having you just like shove them deep down into your gut to deal with later.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think Luke becoming a Jedi and not having any of that,
Right.
not having any of that structure, I feel like he naturally found a balance in the Force.
Mm-hmm.
Which was why it was notable to discuss whether or not we think Obi-Wan and Yoda became essentially grayer as they got older in terms of the Force, not in terms of hair color.
Yeah.
Because they essentially trained Luke to be a gray Jedi between the two of them.
Right, so they gave him words of guidance, but they didn't restrict him.
Right.
I mean, if we want to compare the way that Obi-Wan would talk to Anakin versus the way that Obi-Wan talked to Luke,
yeah.
like that's a direct comparison.
You notice that even Yoda became a little more lenient over his old age and the whole teaching somebody, because when he finally sees Luke show up on Dagobah, he tries to go like, nope, too old you are. Which he knows darn well that they've taught somebody old. I mean, yeah, he turned to a bad guy in their eyes. He murdered a bunch of children.
Look how that went.
Yeah.
It didn't exactly end well for them.
I feel like Yoda was particularly crushed whenever Dooku turned. I feel like seeing where his former Padawan, I don't know how he got so lost in and everything, I feel like it gave Yoda like a lot more insight seeing that. Like I know in the end he said something to the effect of like I rather see you die than give yourself completely to the dark side or whatever. And he always had that, you know, like maybe he felt like he failed him, or maybe, like I said earlier, it gave him more clarity, as in, like, because maybe from sitting on the council for so long, he was like, maybe I've been blind, you know?
Right.
I do think that adds a little perspective to Yoda's reaction to Anakin too. He wanted to do everything he possibly could to prevent that outcome from happening again. So if he felt like he gave Dooku too much space to explore those emotions, he looked at Anakin and went, "We can't do that," and failed again spectacularly.
Yeah.
which is why he then does not take that approach with Luke.
Yeah. He's like, oh, you have emotions? Yeah, just don't do that thing.
Don't do that.
You can
Don't have those.
you can think about it, but don't act on it, please.
Yeah.
Here's the other issue that I had with them training Anakin was when Anakin comes to him and says, I'm having visions. They're like, gotta be careful with those things. Those can lead to the dark side. And I was just like, you know just as well as any other Jedi, because Yoda, you've had visions too. Like,
it reminds me of like Waterboy's mom.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, no.
women are the devil,
Absolutely.
or something else is the devil.
Yeah.
You know, like you have to avoid it completely.
Yeah, they really did him dirty with all that, like, oh, you're dealing with this? Stop dealing with it. If you ignore it, it'll go away. And it's like, no, it won't. Like, this is a kid that you didn't get to, first of all, for the first example, his mom, you know, you didn't get to take him away from his mom as young as you took all the other kids. Of course he has a more secure attachment to his mother.
Mhm.
You don't get to just say that doesn't exist because you don't like it, because you haven't had to deal with that challenge before.
I know this is a question you had that you wanted to get into eventually. Was how do you think Anakin would turn out if Qui-Gon had survived?
Had been his mentor, yeah, had actually been able to follow through with training him.
I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
One of the things that sticks out the most to me is kind of the differences between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, which is weird since he was Obi-Wan's mentor. But if we look at the example of them all being in love with women, which is such a problem.
Yeah.
It's such a problem. You know, Qui-Gon probably would have been willing to admit that he was going through the same thing that Anakin was going through. Obi-Wan never admitted it for some reason. Like, Obi-Wan pretended that was a thing he never experienced when it came to Anakin. And he just let Anakin go through it totally by himself instead of saying, like, I've been there.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, like, it was like Obi-Wan said at the end, you were a brother to me, right?
Right.
What Anakin needed was a father, not a brother.
But it's just so interesting because, like, Obi-Wan could have related to him on that topic in so many moments. And he literally looked at those opportunities to maybe kind of meet Anakin where he was at and help pull him up higher and said, kid'll figure it out. Teens make great decisions.
Notoriously.
It's like
yes.
they are known for their good decisions.
You said about Obi-Wan saying about being a brother and what he needed was a father, but they both had that father figure. Especially Obi-Wan kind of had his father figure, and that was Qui-Gon. And Qui-Gon's dying wish was, I want you to take care of that boy. So they both grew up together. I mean, I'd have to look up to see exactly what their age difference was. I think Anakin was like, 9?
When they found him or when Qui-Gon died?
Well, yeah, when Qui-Gon died, what what their age was exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not even completely certain as to Obi-Wan's and Qui-Gon's relationship was. I've been wanting to read that book about their relationship as Obi-Wan was Qui-Gon's Padawan, and I know it says something about them, like they butted heads a lot, right? Like they didn't get on well with a lot of things. And it was a constant challenge between the two of them because of the way they viewed things. And I need to look into that, because I would like a lot more insight into how their relationship was.
When I watch and read things about their relationships, I can see that bond and why Obi-Wan felt torn up about it, and this is the reason why I love Revenge of the Sith, like the whole fight scene between the two of them. There was so much passion in that whole entire fight scene. I mean, because of their closeness, Anakin feeling like he's been betrayed by the closest person to him, and in a time where everybody's gone. You know, his mom's no longer around. The Padme, he feels like she's betraying him, and right now, pretty much dying because he's stupid.
I have a quick Google
Okay.
to add information.
Go ahead.
So when Anakin was 9, Obi-Wan was 25, Qui-Gon was 48, and Padme was 14.
Right. So yeah, Obi-Wan would have been like an older brother.
No, 25, he could have absolutely had a 9-year-old.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's really, really young for Obi-Wan,
That's
but
true.
But I'm saying, like, if we're talking about Anakin needed a father figure,
Mhm.
Obi-Wan should have been old enough and mature enough to accomplish that. Now, whether he wasn't fully prepared to or wasn't actually emotionally mature enough to, but he was old enough that that should have been a choice. He should have been able to meet Anakin's needs as a mentor.
Yeah, but I just feel like Obi-Wan, I feel like emotionally he wasn't mature enough to be able to temper Anakin's, his emotions. Because Anakin always had these crazy strong emotions.
Right.
Yeah? I feel like Obi-Wan was stunted in that regard, where he wasn't able to meet Anakin on those levels, as where I feel like Qui-Gon had the patience to do so.
And I absolutely agree. I'm just saying that, like, the age disparity between them was 16 years. So, capability-wise, Obi-Wan should have been able to achieve that when he saw that that was what Anakin needed. Now, whether or not he actually saw that's what Anakin needed or not is a whole different discussion. And whether or not he was actually prepared to have a Padawan is another discussion. But like, the age difference was there that they didn't have to be brothers.
He could have, but he didn't approach it as such.
He didn't approach it as such. He maybe wasn't prepared to approach it as such. It would be interesting to know how many Jedi had really messed up first Padawans. Because what's the average age that they take on a Padawan?
I mean, the other, I wanted to bring it up since we were talking about the whole, now that you're bringing up the Padawan. So, Anakin would have been Obi-Wan's first Padawan. Very first
Well, that's
one.
what, yeah.
And judging by what I know about some of the other Jedi Masters, is that their first Padawans haven't always worked out. I mean, because Dooku turned to the dark side. He's probably, I believe, one of the first Padawans that Yoda really had.
Yeah, I don't know.
If not, maybe second. Qui-Gon's first Padawan turned.
Well, and it's just unfortunate for Obi-Wan then that his first Padawan was such like a crucial personality for the Jedi Order. But then the argument would be at that point that why did the Jedi Council ever let that happen? Why did they ever let him take such a crucial person as his first Padawan? Because they had the opportunity to not let that happen.
Right.
Well, I feel like the council held Obi-Wan in such high regard because the way how straight and narrow Obi-Wan was. I feel like they just thought like if anybody can put this Padawan on the straight and narrow, it would be Obi-Wan.
I know. I'm just thinking from the perspective of like if so many first Padawans turned out so horribly, that has to be a thing that they talk about the way that like actors talk about curses and superstition. You know what I mean? Like, it has to come up at some point.
I feel it's one of those things where it's they really don't want to talk about it. It's like that one thing where you're like, oh, well, yeah, let's just never talk about this again, you know? That makes me look bad. Like, I let that person down.
But this would go back to that, like, do they fulfill their original purpose thing then? Because if the Jedi are supposed to be logical, and like that's the reason for the lack of attachment, is so that they do not get in the way of logic and reason, then it should have come up. It should have come up that like people notoriously screw up their first Padawan, and here we are handing this boy that we've all agreed is crucial to the survival of the Jedi Order and the Jedi way of life, and we're just gonna hand him over to Obi-Wan, who's never had a Padawan before, because that's gonna end really well.
No, I definitely see a reasoning there. Yeah.
This guy has no experience. Let's give him the hardest job. The hardest one and the most crucial one. The one that, like, we know about the prophecy and we all agree that it's Anakin. So if he screws up, we all go down. But that's what we're going to hang our hats on, is that decision right there.
I mean, Obi-Wan was one of the ones that, like, tested highest for the time that he was in. He was very promising, very strong for his age as a Padawan. So, yeah, everything looked very promising on his end. And then coming from a master like Qui-Gon.
I get it that, like, in theory, Obi-Wan had the credentials. I'm just saying that, like, eventually statistics would come into play, and as the logical side of the Force, statistics should matter.
But, well, maybe Jedi were just as bad as the Sith were from not, like, that tendency to not learn from the past
absolutely.
Mistakes.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, well, that would definitely be the argument here. But it's just funny, like, from an ironic standpoint, that they're like, we're logic and we're reason and we are zero emotion, and then they go and make this like statistically terrible decision because people notoriously are bad with their first Padawan, which makes sense. You don't know how to like train a whole nother person to do what you do. And you also don't know how to look at a teenager and say, don't have feelings. Like, it's hard, and I get that. But then the irony is there in that they go, this guy's brand new at this job, and this kid is crucial to what we're doing. Let's slam them together and just, like, pray to whatever we believe in it works out.
Do you think Obi-Wan didn't take it as seriously as he should have? Or
I think Obi-Wan took it as seriously as he was expected to take it. Like, I think he tried. It's not that I don't think he tried. It's that he didn't provide Anakin with the type of support that he needed, and probably that he never should have been Anakin's mentor in the first place, as someone who would be taking on their first Padawan.
I loved like throughout the Clone Wars series where every time Anakin made these like huge like moves,
You mean
like
murdering somebody right in front of Obi-Wan?
Yeah, like doing all these crazy things, and all the Jedi Council were like, "Well, that's Anakin," you know.
Play sitcom music here, ba-da. Just.
But I think that's the other thing too, right? How many opportunities did they have to look at it and go, maybe Obi-Wan, as good as he is, isn't like the right choice for this job? But instead, they did. They literally just went like, oh well, and looked into the camera and shrugged their shoulders and moved on with their lives. And it's like, but we're all shocked come Order 66, right? Like, we're agreeing on that we're all shocked when this happens.
Well, so here's what I think. I think they were very well distracted by the events that were unfolding between the Clone Wars, all the things that were happening in the galaxy between the Separatists, even what the Hutts were doing from time to time. They were very well distracted on that. They were still trying to manage each other, but then every so often you were having just these random bounty hunters showing up.
So do you think from like everything that was going on, the council couldn't function as it was originally intended?
Yeah, as far as like an actual proper training to sit down and be able to go over everything, because he was trying to learn on the battlefield. And Anakin's methods were often rash, and he would choose these off-the-wall methods to fight whoever it was that they were fighting. He's like, oh, these are all the tactical things that people do. I want to go non-tactical because they won't expect it, which was true. They would never expect it.
And I'm not saying that they weren't distracted, and I know, like, I keep kind of coming back to the same points, but it's because they all agreed that this was the kid from the prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
And they just, like, they decided to put that so low on their list of concerns, like checking in on this kid who they knew had issues with his emotions that were unbecoming of a Jedi, and that they had put with, like, this green mentor who had never done this before, and they were like, that does not need supervision because we're too busy with so many other things. And that just feels like a poor decision.
The fact that we're talking about the distraction and like the implications of that distraction, it gives me a whole new respect for Palpatine and how he just played the galaxy like a fiddle.
He was doing it. He took the systems that were in place and made them work for his ends, which was incredibly impressive because it allowed him to take his eye off of 16 courts and focus on one or two at a time because the systems were working for him. Like that's pretty impressive.
Man, he is just one cunning SOB, isn't he?
He was absolutely cunning, and I mean, you definitely almost want to give this guy some respect because the planet, now what was it Coruscant, actually had a temple hidden underneath its world, and it was a Sith temple, and none of the Jedi knew it.
Oh, was there?
Nobody knew it. So because of all that power seething up under the planet, the Jedi were blinded by what was going on. So they didn't even know that there was a Sith around. They were like, I can sense that something weird's happening, but I don't know what it is. So it's got to be Sith. And they could never sense him.
Well, I know Windu especially had these crazy suspicions of Palpatine.
Right.
But yeah, like you said, like it seemed like clouded in a sense. How he couldn't entirely pinpoint it until it was too late, I guess.
To some extent, I do think Windu was a relatively paranoid person. Which like brings us into the realm of a broken clock is right twice a day. Like if he's paranoid about everything, something's gonna be right. You know, I also think Palpatine was arguably maybe one of the smartest people with their hand in the pot at that point. You know what I mean? Like one of the most intelligent players in the game, because he knew who the problem people were going to be for him, including Windu, who just like notoriously did not trust people. And he said, these are the ones that I need to like mess with the most to make sure that I can accomplish what I am seeking to accomplish. And he targeted a kid whose mentor was new at this as someone who could be easily swayed, but was also important enough that the Jedi weren't just going to cast him out the first second they thought something was up. Because they could have just let Anakin go. They could have just said, you know what? You're becoming more trouble than you're worth. we think Palpatine has a pretty good grasp on you, and from a politician, we don't like that. So we're just gonna sever our ties. You're on your own. Good luck, and see you later. Because they didn't want him in the first place.
You mean as far as him being put onto the council?
Well, as far as like they pushed back on Qui-Gon quite a bit when he brought Anakin to them in the first place. Because he was older, they thought he was going to be more trouble than he was worth. They were right. They thought he was going to be more trouble than he was worth in the first place. So, fast forward a few years when Anakin starts causing trouble, or what they consider to be trouble, but at that point, they had themselves all so convinced that he was essential to the prophecy, whether he was or not, that they were like, well, we can't just like cast him out at this point. But they might have been a little better off if they had severed those ties, because Palpatine would have lost his eyes and ears with them.
Right, but how do you cast out a Jedi Knight? Is that something that's been done?
Well, he wasn't. He was a student when a lot of this started. I think regardless if it was essential to make that exception, it could have been made. I mean, they hold all the power when it comes to the Jedi Order. So if they felt that it was essential to their survival to say, you're not doing what we need you to do, and we've asked you multiple, like getting fired from a job, right? Like, you're not doing what we need you to do, and we've asked you multiple times, so you're just going to have to get out at this point. And they could have at least given themselves a bit more of a leg up had they done that, because again, that was Palpatine's eyes and ears. When it comes to them, there's a lot of coulda, woulda, shoulda, because again, there was a lot of like looking at what Anakin was doing and going, I'm choosing not to deal with this right now. You shouldn't have done that. We're gonna smack your hands a little bit, but we're not going to formally deal with the fact that you did a thing that we don't think you should be doing.
I feel like within Jedi, there's not necessarily the council, but Jedi tend to have this constant sense of hope that they have trouble letting go of, even with the whole like sticking to reason, the code that they had.
Boy, I hope I can stick to the code.
Yeah, right. But yeah, there's always this sense of hope that they always had. Like, I feel like it so often clouded their judgment.
Both sides were pretty clouded. I mean, they would have tunnel vision toward one thing, and I mean, if they could see just both sides.
I agree, but I also think that for the Jedi Council to collectively have had so many moments where they went, oh man, I have a bad feeling about this.
Which is just a go-to Star Wars thing. I've got a bad feeling about this.
When you have, like, Anakin does something, and 2 or 3 council members are like, I have a bad feeling about what Anakin just did, but we can't address it right now. Multiple times, they just left it and either said, Obi-Wan, take care of it, or we'll deal with that later. And like, when is later? Because if this keeps going, it's just going to keep, like, now he's not been taught that he shouldn't do that, or there've been no consequences for him doing that. And what happens when people don't have consequences for things?
I've been thinking, what would you say the end goal of the Jedi and the Sith were? What were they working up towards? What would determine their finality and their goal?
I guess that depends on what you think the Force is, because there is a big difference in outcomes between if the Force is more of like a, not religion, but like a spiritual experience versus like a physical one. Like a thing to be mastered versus a thing to be explored.
Right. No. Well, I'm talking about their goal for the galaxy as a whole.
Right. And I'm saying that might be different depending on what you see the Force as, because the big signifier of Sith and Jedi is that they are Force users, right?
Right.
So if the Force is more of a spiritual thing, that allows them extra insight into the world, you can do something different with that than if it is a physical thing that gives you superpowers. You see what I'm saying? And I think there's a little bit of room for interpretation there. Like, obviously they have extended abilities because they are Force users, but application wise, if it's a thing that you use for power, is there a way to use it for good? Because there's a quote, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So if it is a source of power, is there the potential to use it for good?
Well, speaking in absolutes, I mean, I would say probably not. Yeah, I don't know, because like, you know, when I think of the Jedi and their end goal, it was always like this they wanted peace in the galaxy or whatever, right?
Well, maybe the perspective is that they were both doing what they thought was best to improve the galaxy.
Yeah, so with the Jedi, their goal was to find peace and so with peace, you know, where everyone's content, right? Everyone's docile, I guess, to an extent.
Everyone's like good with where they're at. Like, no one's wanting for more and everyone has enough to get by.
Where the Sith, they wanted to break all chains and gain like absolute freedom, I felt like. Because, like, you know, in the overall structure of the galaxy, it seemed like it was like constricting in a sense.
So you're saying that we'd be looking at peace versus like peace at any cost versus freedom at any cost.
I felt that way, like at least initially. Like, I know as far as the Sith go, we see them as being like they have this drive for power and domination. But I feel like originally, at least, or in their mantra, it was this sense of freedom that they wanted to achieve. But with that freedom, it was, I guess I don't want to say misconstrued it, but they saw it as, if I achieve, or if I'm the most powerful being in the galaxy, then I'll have absolute freedom.
Right. Well, it seems like it went from collective freedom to personal freedom.
Right.
Yeah, especially like with how the Sith were, you know, before, how they were just kept killing each other.
Yeah.
Everything went wrong for them because they're just like, I want to be the strongest. I want to be the strongest.
But I think, interestingly, the Jedi sort of ended up doing the same thing conceptually. Like, it went from overall peace and what would bring about peace collectively to what's the least amount of trouble for us? Like, what lets us be at peace more often? Because when we talk about the rebellions, for instance, you're right, they didn't look at the situation, decide what was going to give longer standing peace and fight for that. They looked at the situation, went, these are the people that asked for our help. This is how it's going to be over the most quickly. So that's what we're going to do. So that we don't have to deal with this anymore.
Yeah, like you said, there'd be these rebellions where people are like, oh, it's unequal and we're all suffering. And the Jedi are like, yeah, but why don't you just be content with the little bit that you have and stop all this fighting?
Death is on the horizon, and then you won't have to deal with it anymore, and then everyone will be fine. So, like, just chill out for 5 more seconds, and then everyone will be okay.
Accept your lot in life and settle down, please.
You're being awfully loud, and I have a headache today.
Yeah. That's what it seems like when you want just peace, because that's all peace is, right? It's just no fighting.
It is when you don't have to live there. So one of the things about the Jedi Council is, like, how many of their stations on various planets existed at that point? Because, like, there would have been a time where they had, I don't know if they were Jedi temples or monasteries basically, but they would have like different stations on different planets, and they would kind of live among the people that they were supposed to work with.
Right. So the Jedi had their temples, the Sith had their temples, and now the temples existed because those planets had special energy. Like there was something about the planet that seed whether it was a light side presence or the presence of the dark side, which coincidentally, the dark side temples usually were on planets that were inherently further from the sun or a sun.
So what I'm saying is, like, as those temples were kind of abandoned, because the implication is that they were at some point, do we see the Jedi take on this more callous approach to the people of these various planets? Because they're no longer living in the same places as these people. They get to quote unquote solve the problem and then they leave. Whereas when they were occupying temples, they had to firsthand see the outcome of the decisions they were making and the implications of the decisions that they were. So, like, you know, if they made a decision that caused hundreds of thousands of people to suffer, they were witnessing it firsthand. Whereas after vacating the temples, they go, we make this decision, we enforce this decision, and now we leave. And whatever the outcome is, we get to ignore.
Like, considering that, I guess with Darth Bane's rule of two, it was definitely needed for the dark side. Because, yeah, there was that push for absolute power to be able to break the chains of oppression. And, yeah, I guess there was this going back to that tendency for them for that infighting, It was essential that it becomes more of a solo project.
But it's also interesting that, the rule of two is established, and, it almost pushes the Jedi farther off track, because there's not as many Sith for them to, like, combat.
It becomes this more influential thing rather than an enemy.
Yeah, there's less of a, like, concrete, this is what we're trying not to be like. And so their compass, their north on their compass kind of can become skewed darker because there aren't as many physical examples of what they're trying not to be. So the rule of two might have also been one of the catalysts for the kind of non-Jedi that we see in the prequels. Ill-prepared Jedi, I guess, is more accurate. They're not mentally prepared to deal with a Sith.
Yeah, certainly not. Yeah, they seemed like so oblivious.
Well, and the fact that the implication that there might be a Sith present sent them into this, like, panic.
It's like, oh my god, like, who is
What
it?
do we do? What do we do? We have never had this happen before.
Like, we're always told that they're like the boogeyman,
Bigfoot.
But,
we thought we saw one once, but it was a smudge on our camera lens.
And then they're actually faced with Darth Maul, and they're like, oh, he's just an evil dude that is really good at fighting. He's bad man.
Bad guy.
That's all we get.
Bad guy.
That's all we get. But that's an easy one.
Just kind of funny that potentially the rule of two is what set the Jedi up to be destroyed in the end, because they're just so incapable of dealing with a Sith, because they just don't have to that regularly, because there's only two Sith.
In a huge galaxy. I mean,
right.
How many Sith are you going to run into in a galaxy as huge as Star Wars? I mean...
More than you would think. More than you would think. Exactly two more than you think you would run into.
So, I mean, even when they would run into somebody else, right? So, say, Asajj Ventress. So they'd run into her and be like, oh my god, there's only two. You end up getting rid of her, and then another one appears, and they're like, Jesus.
Yeah, well, Ventress was an interesting one. So with the rule of two, right? There can only be two. The apprentice has to best the master or like has that thriving for ultimate power, and the apprentice needs to overcome the master. So generation after generation of Sith becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. And then I think Dooku recruited Ventress originally, and not calling her a Sith because that would go against the rule of two, right?
Right.
But I think his original intent was for Ventress to assist Dooku in offing Palpatine. Wasn't that the original intent for him recruiting Ventress?
A lot of the apprentices that Dooku had taken on were in hopes that he could help get rid of Palpatine. Even when he went back to the same planet, he went back to collect another apprentice, and this time ended up getting another son of Dathomir, and they powered him up and said, all right, here you go. Palpatine figured it out.
So here's my question with regards to that. Was Palpatine intentionally choosing students who wouldn't be able to defeat him until Anakin?
Until he got Anakin?
Until he got Anakin, because Anakin was widely agreed to be stronger than any Force user they'd ever seen before. Was Palpatine intentionally choosing students who could not defeat him?
Yeah, I think he was getting buffers, to cover the time until he could get Anakin.
I think he chose these people who seemed pretty promising. I mean, Darth Maul was definitely pretty promising after all, being chopped in half and still surviving. You gotta admit...
Spoilers.
Sorry, spoilers. Gotta admit that's pretty badass. That's pretty good for a dark side user. So having all these people, he definitely wasn't expecting Maul to live.
Well, he turned his back on
Maul.
Oh,
absolutely. He was just like, you got defeated by a Padawan.
What a loser. You're out.
I mean, because he was already upset with Vader for what happened on Mustafar, and him getting defeated by Obi-Wan, and him living as a giant cyborg. He would no longer teach Anakin the dark side because he's seen him as a disgrace. He's just like, you can't do all the things you once could. He's seen him as a form of his, or a shell of his former self.
Right. But what I'm saying is, were all of these things like, yeah, he's picking promising students, but like maybe not as promising as he could be choosing, because Palpatine had this huge long plan that he wanted to carry out that ended in him being emperor. So isn't it in his best interest to, one, pick students who he think can't defeat him? And two, when he does get a student that he knows has the like natural ability to defeat him, just like by the nature of Anakin, has the ability to defeat him. He goes, you're a cyborg now? Well, I'm not teaching you anymore. That's it. I'm not teaching you anymore. You're going to get no stronger than you are right now. And I know I can beat Obi-Wan, so I can still beat Anakin.
There was this, so within the rule of two, there was this kind of legend, like this bond between master and apprentice, as far as the Sith go. I forget the word for it, but it was something that Palpatine and Plagueis tried to achieve, but they couldn't make that bond for some reason. And that's what led to Palpatine killing Plagueis. And then he wanted to achieve that with Anakin because of his bloodline.
I was going to say maybe because of species. Plagueis being some alien species, and then Palpatine being basically a citizen of Naboo.
Well, if it's species-based, then is it possible that once Anakin became more machine than man, basically, isn't it possible that that made it so that they also could not achieve that bond anymore?
Maybe.
And then at that point, Palpatine goes, I'm not going to teach you. Again, it's in Palpatine's best interest to not train someone who can kill him. And Palpatine knows that. Like, we talked about how smart he is. And whole plan hinges on him becoming emperor. Like, that is the thing. I don't know why more Sith before him didn't do it that way. Like, pick people who you're like, this person probably won't be able to kill me, ever. That seems like poor planning on a lot of their parts. He's strong, I like him. Oh wait, yeah, he can kill me now. That probably was not my best decision.
I don't know. I felt like it was something that was kind of expected, like something like within that culture that was, inevitable.
Right.
I feel like it was just something they were more accepting of, like, well, someday he might get stronger than me and off me, but
like a crotchety old grandpa. Someday I'm gonna die.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm gonna die someday.
And in that case, maybe Palpatine was kind of a rule breaker. But like, I got the feeling that he was intentionally, except for Anakin, trying to pick people who wouldn't be able to kill him because he had these grand plans that he wanted to achieve.
Yeah, I think he was just choosing based on, people that would help him accomplish, what he was going
Means
for.
to an end.
But
yeah.
Okay. So yeah, like, especially with like Dooku and stuff, he's like, he's going to be a big help, because he's chummy with the council and everything.
He's just like a good political guy.
Yeah, he'll help me achieve what I need to achieve, and plus that underlying realization of the disparity,
right,
with the Jedi and the rest of the galaxy. He's like, this will be good.
Kudos to him though for seeing the cracks in the Jedi and being like, now's my chance to move. Like, regardless of any decisions they make from here on in, those cracks exist, and I only need a little bit of leverage to break this whole thing apart. Kudos to the villain, man.
He only knows about the cracks just because, Anakin was feeding him all this information, unfortunately.
I think that's not entirely true, but only because he had the presence of mind to get into politics to get him close to the Jedi. Like, you don't do that. You don't put yourself out there like that, which everyone at the time agreed was dangerous for him to do if he was Sith, to get that physically close to the Jedi Council. You don't do that unless you're fairly certain there are cracks that can be exploited.
Yeah, like, as far as Anakin goes, like, he was doing this before Anakin ever came along.
Right.
He was just like, as soon as Anakin came along, he was like, ooh, shiny.
This is my final in that can, like, put the last nail in the coffin. That's what Anakin was. But he had to know that the cracks existed before then, because he did all the legwork to get him in the position to, like, when he saw his chance, hammer that final nail and shatter the whole thing apart.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How much longer do you want to go?
I don't know. I feel like that's pretty good right there.
That's enough.
2 hours. 2 hours of editing, dude. If any listeners out there have any questions whatsoever, please put them in the comments, because we would all love to make a return to this and do another one of these, because this was a lot of fun.
I don't know. I don't know if I need to come back, but y'all can talk about it again.
Oh man, this was awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you, Jane Doe, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You.
It was tons of fun.
This was absolutely great. Thank you for joining us on the Merle and Locke podcast. If you enjoyed this banter, please consider becoming a patron by going to patreon.com/Merle and Locke, or simply follow the link in the description. Thank you.